going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about The Challengers of the Unknown Must Die by Jeff Loeb and the late Tim Sale. This is an 8-issue miniseries from, I think, 1991. This is the second time that I've talked about it. I reviewed it about 9 years ago, and I didn't just love it, and I am currently at a point in my life where I'm looking at my graphic novel collection, and I am trying to decide, is there anything here that I could bear to be without? And I reread this Challengers of the Unknown book, and I have to say, I don't think that I hated it. I probably sounded like I just really disdained it in my video from 9 years ago, but looking at it this time, I don't think that it's necessarily something that I loved either. I think that it's got some good stuff. I mentioned in my last review of it that Tim Sale did some really interesting experimental stuff with the art, stuff that I don't think he really did much of in his later career. He's really known for Batman the Long Halloween, a lot of his Batman work, Catwoman When in Rome, Dark Victory, and Haunted Night. I feel like he's mostly known for his Batman stuff. He did do some stuff at Marvel in the early 2000s, like Hulk Gray, Daredevil Yellow, stuff like that. But I feel like in his later career, his artwork felt a lot more standard. But in this book, we get to see him do a lot of really weird experimental stuff that we don't get to see as much later in his career. And I liked a lot of that. But overall, this didn't really work for me. In the foreword by Brian Michael Bendis, he described this as the Dark Knight Returns for the Challengers of the Unknown. And I guess that's an accurate description of it. The problem is, at this point in time, the Challengers of the Unknown were basically, no pun intended, unknown. They had a series that started in the 50s, and then I don't even think lasted very far into the 1960s, once superhero comics became entrenched in pop culture in the early 60s. I think the Challengers of the Unknown kind of faded away, and they did have a series again in the 70s, I think. There are a couple of footnotes in this book that reference some issues from the 70s, but by this point, it had been probably 15 years since the Challengers of the Unknown had been seen in comics. They may have had like a cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths or something like that. Looking at this book now, I mostly know the Challengers from New Frontier. They have a little bit of a part to play in that story, but the Challengers nowadays, I feel like, are mostly seen as the prototype to the Fantastic Four. They're basically the Fantastic Four without superpowers. There's an accident that brings these, at first it's 4 people, and then later they add some more members to the team, these 4 guys together, and then they say, we're living on borrowed time, so now we're gonna fight mad scientists and aliens and monsters and stuff like that. It's a really interesting premise for a series. I would really love to read some other Challengers of the Unknown stories. Unfortunately, so The Dark Knight Returns, a lot of people have described it as a deconstruction of Batman. And you can deconstruct something when everyone is aware of the thing that you are deconstructing. When I read Dark Knight Returns for the first time, I don't think I had read any other Batman comics before I read that book. It was a long time ago. I read it at my library. I didn't have any other Batman books of my own. I read a few Batman books that the library had. I think The Killing Joke, Dark Knight Returns, maybe, I know there was more. Year One might have been at my local library, I can't remember, but basically Dark Knight Returns was my entry into Batman comics. But I was aware of Batman as a character. I was aware of Adam West. I was aware of Kevin Conroy and the live-action movies that were out at that time. And so, going into Dark Knight Returns, I still understood, okay, this is kind of taking apart and rebuilding this thing that I am familiar with. Bendis calling this miniseries the Dark Knight Returns of the Challengers, that doesn't really work because a lot of people, myself included, aren't really familiar with the Challengers, and therefore you're deconstructing something before we have a chance to get to see what was constructed before. And Bendis even says in the foreword that when he first bought this miniseries off the shelf, he didn't know that the Challengers of the Unknown existed before. He thought that Loeb and Sale created these characters, and so it doesn't really work as a deconstruction. In order to deconstruct something, your audience needs to be aware of what it is that you are deconstructing. And I'm sure there are books out there that collect some of the adventures of the Challengers of the Unknown. I haven't read any of them. Unfortunately, this is a team that hasn't really been able to make its way into the present day. They're still out there somewhere. There's been a few attempts, this one and other stories, to bring the Challengers into the present day. It just doesn't ever seem to really work. But this idea of we're going to take this team and then we're going to do a dark tearing them apart and then rebuilding it together, in my opinion, it just doesn't work. Now, the basic plot is the Challengers, they think that they have accidentally blown up their headquarters. 2 of their members die, and several other people who live near their headquarters also die, and then the team has to go their separate ways. They are found not guilty in a court of law, but they are said, you guys really need to retire. You guys don't need to keep doing Challengers of the Unknown stuff because a lot of people almost died or did die. And so then we see one guy who basically becomes the Punisher. He's going out there murdering criminals. One guy, he tries to become a movie star and ends up becoming an alcoholic. And then one guy, he becomes a sorcerer. And then they all join forces at the end because there's this demon that made its way to our reality when they accidentally blew up their mountain. They find out they weren't responsible for blowing up the mountain. And then they have to fight the demon, and then the end. And it doesn't really work as a Challenger story because for 80% of the book, the Challengers are not a team. They've gone their separate ways, and you get to see an issue where the guy studying sorcery, he is thinking about philosophy, and then you get to see an issue where this other guy, he's going down the bottle, and he's slowly losing money because he's got this girl who's hanging out with him who likes expensive things, and it's a lot of really interesting experimental stuff with the art, like I said earlier, but it doesn't really work as a Challenger story because the Challengers are not a team for most of this book. And I feel like if you, I don't know, it just doesn't work for me. I feel like my thoughts have been kind of scattered with this video, but overall, I don't hate it. There are some things that I like about this book, but I don't think that it really works for me. Now, if you are a really big fan of Loeb and Sale's other collaborations that they did in the years following this, and you had never heard of this story, you might want to check it out, and you might like it more than I did. I can just say that for myself, this didn't really work for me. I didn't really like it. So that is about all that I have to say about the Challengers of the Unknown Must Die. I hope that you guys like this video, and I will see you guys in the future with something else. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.